Welcome, folks. We're waiting a couple minutes for more people to join us, but thank you so much for being here. All right, everyone. I see that we are streaming live on Facebook today. Welcome to the closing ceremony of the Bluff Arts Festival. Just so folks know, as we're waiting for more people to join us, your videos and your mics have been muted and turned off today, so don't worry about accidentally, speaking into the presentation. All right, well, we're about 2 minutes past the hour, so why don't we go ahead and get started on the final closing event of the Bluff Arts Festival. My name is Amanda Podmore. I'm one of the volunteers and coordinators of the Bluff Arts Festival Committee, and welcome everybody today. It has been so fabulous connecting with folks in this remote and distance time, having such intimate experiences with people from across the country and around the world. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Just a reminder to folks that you are muted and your videos are off, so no worries on that end. As we kick off the closing ceremony today, which will include a couple announcements, which will include some Bluff readings, and then our featured event with Amy Irvine and Pam Houston and Torrey House Press, I do want to go over a couple of things, but first and foremost, start off with a thank you and acknowledgement to the traditional, ancestral, and modern day Indigenous lands in which we are standing on today, whether you're in Bluff or anywhere across the country. In Bluff today in particular, I want to thank the Hopi, Zuni, Ute, Mountain Ute, Dene, Paiute, and other Indigenous peoples on whose lands we are present, and we thank them for their stewardship of those lands. I also want to give a really big thank you to all the volunteers that have made this festival possible. We decided to do this festival about 2 months ago, and just huge props to Dan and Jocelyn Myers, Aaron Richards, who's been making these Zoom presentations run so smoothly, Jose Yavari, who put on the best film fest I've ever seen, Kirsten Ewing, Zach Podmore, and many other people that made this possible. Of course, we also want to thank our sponsors for the weekend, which include Rocky Mountain Power, Community Rebuilds, Adventure Wealth, and Utah's Canyon Country. And of course, we are so grateful to the many businesses in Bluff and the broader Four Corners that have supported us throughout the years. We know this has been a really challenging year for the businesses, and so they are, in a way, our honorary sponsors this year as well. And the Bluff Arts Festival wouldn't be an arts festival without an artist market, so we got creative this year and brought the artists to you virtually. We have 30 artists on our website. That's bluffartsfestival.org. And we really encourage you to get to know their work, support them if you can. This has been a challenging year with a lot of markets, in-person markets, having been canceled or changed in their nature. So, it'd be great to show our love for the really vibrant talent of the Four Corners. Next, in case you didn't get to see all of the presentations for this year's Bluff Arts Fest, or you want to re-watch any portion of them, these are all the events that we've hosted, including this one that'll be available both on our Facebook, and links will be on our website too, so you can join in, share with folks. We just want as many people as possible to participate in this event. Just a quick piece on how many folks we've been able to reach this year with this virtual nature. Traditionally with the in-person festival, we might have 200 or so people come to our film fest, but this year we had over 392 different computers tune into all of our virtual events, which, if you're thinking about multiple people per computer, we're talking about hundreds of people that were able to access this festival from all across the United States. We had people in Seattle and Tucson and Denver and many indigenous nations. And we had people in France tune in. It's just been a really tremendous event. We had over 2,000 people tune in on Facebook as well. So glad to be connecting with folks in whatever way we can. So we're about to jump into the fun substance of today's event. And just a reminder, you are muted and your videos are turned off, but we still hope that you can engage in the event today. And so there's a couple ways you can do that. On your Zoom, you have a chat box at the bottom, and we welcome you right now to say hi in the chat box and let us know where you're tuning in from. It's really cool to, again, connect across geographies. You also have a raise hand feature that you can tap at the bottom of your screen. As we're going into Q&As later on in the event, if you want to be able to speak face-to-face with any of the panelists, well, virtually face-to-face, we invite you to raise your hand. And then lastly, there's a Q&A box that you can type in questions, and then we can ask those to the panelists. So we do hope that you find those useful today. Let me see if I have anything else I want to share with you before we get going. So the first portion of today's event is going to be some story sharing about how your relationship with Bluff might have been impacted by the pandemic today. And I want to give a special thanks to Kirsten Ewing, whose idea this was to collect these stories. And we're hoping that someday in the future we can have all these stories on paper or whatever form, and we'd like to burn them in classic Bluffoon tradition, in some sort of effigy burning. So I'm gonna open with a story that was sent to us, and then we're gonna invite a couple folks as well to share their own stories. So the story that I'm gonna share with you comes all the way from Florida, from I would call him an honorary Bluffoon just because I know he loves it so much. This story is from Mike Garcia. And Mike, I hope it's okay with you. I'm going to paraphrase a few sections just for the sake of time, but here's Mike's story is how COVID-19 killed my 2020 vacation, which I'm sure a lot of us can relate to. So Mike opens, "My hopes for an epic 2020 vacation in Bluff were dashed by the arrival of COVID-19. You see, I've spent many years vacationing in Bluff, each of which were amazing in their own way. But 2020 was going to be something special, nothing less than the end of an era. Let me explain, and this is going to be a bit of a journey." So Mike goes on to share his experience of connecting with Bluff and the Four Corners over time. And this started with a canoe trip on the Green River in Canyonlands, which led him next to crave more outings in the Southwest and in Southeast Utah. So his next trip was a guided raft trip down the San Juan River. And that was with Wild Rivers Expeditions, which we know and still love in Bluff. And on that Wild Rivers trip, he had a guide, another Bluffoon named Jay William. And Jay recommended that Mike get in touch with Vaughn Haydenfeld, this fantastic guide in the area. But Mike decided to kind of shop around first. And so Mike hired a llama packing guide to take him into Grand Gulch. And this llama adventure turned out to be not quite what Mike was expecting. First of all, there was a food shortage, which to me is absolute number one reason to panic in life. So not only was there this food shortage they were dealing with, but here's what Mike says about the llamas. Quote, "Another issue was the llamas themselves. Apparently llamas have to be properly socialized to work well as pack animals. Our llamas must have been raised in some bleak llama orphanage where they were routinely neglected and abused by sadistic caretakers. They absolutely hated us, or people. One revealed his homicidal tendencies when he tried to nudge my girlfriend off the edge of a trail high up along the canyon wall. The llama assigned to me hummed constantly, which I at first thought was this cute little thing until I learned that this llama behavior denotes a state of extreme mental distress. This deranged llama never stopped humming. Thank God they didn't have opposable thumbs or they would have knifed us in our sleep." So our idyllic stroll down the Grand Gulch with cute, cuddly, Disney-esque llamas wasn't turning out as anticipated, but the Gulch is an amazing place, so we were still enjoying the trip. After all, what else could possibly go wrong? Never, never say or even think this. What the heck, let's throw in a flash flood for good measure. Not a little flash flood either, but a fairly significant one, a real gusher. So Mike tells this story about a flash flood that ended up stranding them in Grand Gulch, and their guides had to hike out, scramble out, get ranger help in order for them to get out of the canyon safely. The rangers did come in, they made it back to the ranger station just as the sun was setting, and they're huddling in the ranger station, and one of the other clients on their trip who's, like, they're all just, so thankful that they've survived this experience is saying, I've really been wanting to hike with Vaughn. Maybe we really should book this Vaughn guy. So here is Mike describing a trip with Vaughn Haydenfeld. Vaughn ran the kind of trip that it was exactly what I was looking for. Small backpacking trips in the backcountry to well-known or not so well-known locations with a little bit of exploring thrown into the mix. He was a walking encyclopedia, and his knowledge of the area is amazing. He also has a deep respect for the natural and cultural assets of the area, teaching all of his clients to visit with respect. To top it all, he had a treasure trove of stories that he would share at the end of the day, and I was hooked and spent the next 13 years taking hiking vacations with Vaughn. After a few years and a few trips, I asked Vaughn how much longer he planned to work. He told me that he and his accountant had decided that he would work until he was 70, and then he'd retire. Well, that would take us to now, 2020, and it would put me at 60 years old. I decided then and there that come hell or high water, I would be part of his epic farewell tour. Alas, it was not to be, and I am bitterly disappointed. So COVID-19, the disease caused by this nasty little virus with a punk rock hairdo, not only brought the entire world to a standstill, it robbed me of my last chance to hike with Vaughn Haydenfeld and to mark the end of an era. That's what I'll remember most about 2020, and it's something I'll always regret. So Mike does, end us on a sad note, but I'm so happy to say that our next guest reader today will be Vaughn Haydenfeld himself. So Vaughn, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and pass the mic over to you for a reading from you.
Wow, thanks, Mike. Dan had requested writings pertaining to COVID, and I told him I've tried really hard to avoid COVID, thus haven't written about it. Due to the pandemic, I ended my 30-year career as a backcountry hiking guide and closed my company, Far Out Expeditions in Bluff. Being that this is Sunday, and this is my last year of holding commercial permits with the BLM, I hope this short poem will suffice. One last note, BLM in this poem stands for Bureau of Land Management, not the more noble acronym for Black Lives Matter. Here goes, entitled A Canyon Hymn. My place of worship has sandstone walls. Arches are altars and ledges become pews. There are rafters of gnarled cottonwood limbs. Hidden alcove gardens are my inner sanctum. Gods send messages down the aisles in raging flash floods and down canyon breezes. After storm rainbows are my stained glass, and potholes are the tadpoles' baptismal fonts. Scriptures are revealed in images pecked and painted on rock surface patina and sheltered cliff faces, while holy water seeps clear or flows blood red. My collection plate is passed around by the BLM, and I stuff it with permit fees at the end of each guiding season. Thanks so much. What a great festival.
Oh, thank you so much, Vaughn, for that. And, I think it just really speaks to the fact that however people are connecting with this area, each person has their own really strong connection that's not in any way lessened by what we're going through right now. So thank you. I'd like to next invite Dessa Haydenfeld to share some of her words as well.
Thank you. I thought when Dan asked me to write something that maybe my muse had gone into quarantine because I was just not coming up with anything. So at 2 a.m, inspiration struck. Thank you, Kirsten, for reminding me that I could write about my dreams and not bore anybody. So this is my poem on COVID and the reactions of people around us. All right. You're just sheep, they say to us, that wear our masks all day. We are a pack of wolves, they've been heard to say. When they're coming at me, I like to share my dream of far-side sheep in collars styled after RBG. The cartoon bubbles of their thoughts say, come and eat with me. Find the strongest in the herd. They'll take care of you, you'll see. The lambs are all out sharing their warmth and company, looking for danger, letting each other just be. And when one asks the wolf, what you doing over there? The scraggly mutt just answers, losing all my hair. See, my alpha with the russet coat, lounging day and night, that's the only life that matters, not us silver, black, or white. I've worked so hard this summer to feed my alpha's pride. I hope to get some scraps if there's any set aside. And if only I could get some thumbs, a vaccine I would make. Because if I believe in anything, I believe in mange. I see it making all us sick. I'm worried, can't you tell? Alpha says to stay away, just go off by myself. If I do, you'll be safer. I hate to hunt alone. What do you do when you're sick? I'd really like to know. And in its little jacket of thick and curly wool, the little lamb responds, your alpha sounds the fool. When we are sick or injured, we gather all around. We guard the weakest of the group and head to greener ground. We may have to spread ourselves a little far apart, but when we're there for each other, we have much stronger hearts. I like your idea of having thumbs. We could all make PPE, but since we don't, we realize we might die by 2s and 3s, but we go out together. We don't split up in the end, because when you're part of this herd, you've always got a friend. But anyway, good luck to you, the sheep nods to the wolf. I know you'd like to come for me, but I'm in too big of a group. The wolf just eyes the mutton as the sun goes down and slinks off to his master while he's still allowed around. Sometimes life is dark for everyone you see, but I don't want to pack alone. I prefer herd mentality. There you go.
No, thank you, Deza. I'll be a sheep with you. Join in the herd mentality.
I prefer that kind of look anyway. I don't need my scraggly teeth out there.
Oh, well, thank you so much for sharing. I hope we can get that out to the public in a bigger way. That was incredible. Yeah, thank you for representing Bluff. Thanks to everybody who has sent in stories. And again, we hope to burn these at a future date in a very future Bluff way. Now I'm very, very honored and excited to pass the mic to Kirsten Johanna Allen of Torrey House Press so that she can share a little bit about this amazing book, Airmail. It is my favorite companion this week. It's just been a delight at night to actually tune away from the news and tune into this epistolary that's giving me really good ideas about ways to practice my resiliency with friends, with family, how to connect with people across this challenging time. So introducing Kirsten, who will introduce our speakers, Amy and Pam. Kirsten, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Bluff. As Amanda said, I'm Kirsten Johanna Allen. I am publisher and executive director of Torrey House Press. We are the only nonprofit literary press in the Intermountain West and bringing stories about landscape and our relationship to the land, real voices from the land is what we do. And it's just an incredible honor to have worked with Amy Irvine and Pam Houston on their new book, Airmail: Letters of Politics, Pandemics, and Place. Want to tell you just a little bit about how this book came to be from my perspective before I send it on to Amy and Pam. Amy and Pam are actually, I'm in Salt Lake City right now, and Amy and Pam are here at my home. They're out on my patio. And so I've worked with Amy before. 2 years ago, we produced Desert Cabal, a new season in the wilderness together, and we were so honored to share stories from that book along with Regina Lopez White Skunk at a wonderful event in Bluff a year and a half ago at Celebrate Cedar Mesa. Some of you may have joined us at that really fantastic event. Well, fast forward to about May of this year, Amy called me up and said, you know, Pam Houston and I were assigned by Orion Magazine to write a little correspondence. We had not met, and we wrote this correspondence and turned our piece into Orion Magazine. We were writing about our experience with the pandemic, living here in rural places in Colorado. And Amy said, but we kept writing. Pam and I kept writing, and I think we have a book. And we would love to work with Torrey House Press to bring this new book out. But we'd really like it to come out before the election. And I said, well, Amy, you know, this fall, there's really quite a bit that's going to be going on. I don't think the pandemic's going anywhere. There is an election happening. It's, you know, I'm just not sure that this is the time to put a new book out in the world. It's going to be tough to get attention for. Who knows what else is going to happen? You know, I hadn't really envisioned the apocalyptic wildfires that have been in California and now in Colorado. And Amy said, well, let me tell you a little bit more about what we're thinking. And in moments, I realized that this was a book that needed to come to the page and to people and to readers and communities right away. And my colleagues at Torrey House Press and we kind of cleared the countertops and said, yes, we're going to do what we can to make this book happen. And in record time, we took Airmail: Letters of Politics, Pandemics, and Place to the press, and it is now between the covers. And it's just a real joy and an honor to have worked with these two extraordinary writers, extraordinary women who are bringing a fierce love for land, for people, for culture, for history, and a rage that I loved diving into as their publisher and editor, because I feel it too. I mean, why are we in this spot? And so we've got rage, we've got love, but mostly what we have at the end of the day with this book is hope. And it is now my great honor and pleasure to introduce you to Amy Irvine, to Pam Houston, two extraordinary writers. And they've been living on opposite sides of the Great Divide in Colorado, but they join us now side by side from Salt Lake City. Pam and Amy.
Hello, everybody. Oh, I wish we were all together in person, but just knowing you're all out there and hearing these little stories and poems about Bluff sort of ground me back in, of course, what is the most treasured of landscapes for me. We have been on book tour, and we're calling it the Armageddon book tour or the dystopian book tour, because we literally felt so much conviction about getting this book out and rousing people to become as politically involved as they could be this fall. And it feels like it's really working. It feels like 1,000 phone banks over, just the galvanizing effect that being with people together who've been dying to get out and talking about these letters and talking about the friendship that formed between Pam and me, who did not know one another and did not meet in person until late or early July, after we'd finished the letters and sent them off to Torrey House Press and they were in production. We finally met one day in Santa Fe. And now we're roommates and sharing a bubble. So that's we're not masked next to one another, because we've been on the road and dodging lots of COVID hotspots and a lot of forest fires. We've literally been signing books with ash raining down on us. So it's really nice to have made this full circle throughout Utah and Colorado, and to be landing in Bluff for our last event on this campaign trail before we go permanently back into our homes and into hiding, and then we'll only do Zoom events. But thanks for having us today. Do you want to say anything else?
Sure. I guess we're going to read 2 letters today that we haven't been reading, that we haven't ever read, just to fit the time slot, but also because we've been reading the same letters everywhere, and it's nice to change that up. The letters that we normally read are toward the end of the book, which is really our galvanizing moment where we're like, you know, we're going to get on the Mongolian war horses and ride, and we're going to save democracy, and we're going to save the post office, and we're going to save the planet. And as Amy said, this conviction that the strongest force in the world right now is the rage and love of women. And certainly in the United States, all you have to do is look at social media to see women coming together to write letters and postcards and get the vote out and fight for each other and drive people to the polls. And, you know, we have every right to be enraged at what's happened in our country. And, you know, as we saw with the re-election of New Zealand's prime minister, you know, I think it's a very short time until we see women taking over leadership all over the world, and you know, with the good men in tow supporting us, you know, which we talk about a lot in the book. And so this book tour, what has been the so great about it is that people show up and they're like, oh, you know, wine, you know, how great. Like, it's so nice to see each other's faces. And we're at a book event and we haven't been a book event in 8 months. Oh yeah, this is fun. And then by the end, they're like, damn the torpedoes, we're going to save this country. And so that's what we hope to do. I put a little thing on Facebook this morning that people responded to. And so I'll just share that and then we can read. But we were at a reading a few days ago. It was literally the most apocalyptic of all the readings because there were like 80-mile-an-hour winds and ash balls were falling from the sky as we read. And we had driven past the thunderheads of the Cameron Peak fire to get to this reading. And of course, we were all outside, even though it was 40 degrees because we couldn't go inside because of COVID. You know, it really did feel like the book tour at the end of the world. And a woman there asked me, she said, aren't you afraid by writing this very political book, you're going to alienate a large percentage of your readers? And there's a million things I could say about that. And I'm sure you all would have thoughts about that too. But, you know, what it occurred to me to say was, because of Indigenous Peoples Day, I was not able to get my ballot before we left on this loop of the tour. And I have been literally, like, every time we drive through a fire, every time somebody coughs on me, every time the truck's headlights come at us as we've been driving on this tour, I think I just have to get home to vote. I just have to survive till Tuesday. And whether or not I alienate some of my readers in this attempt, this small attempt of ours to try and make some small difference in this catastrophe we're facing, is the least to say. It doesn't make the top 1,000 of my worries right now. So we have one goal here, and that's to put this book into the hands of people and hope that it motivates them to speak out and do whatever they can in the next 16 days, and then whatever they can after that, because we've got so many battles ahead, even if everything goes great on November 3rd. So we're going to read you 2 letters, as I said, we haven't read before. These fall kind of in the middle of the book as we're figuring out our friendship and realizing how important these letters are to us. How, you know, at this point we weren't thinking of a book. It was just, we had written the few short letters for Orion, and we realized we didn't really know how to cope with what was happening to us without these letters and holding each other up and this friendship and sisterhood that we were forging.
So I'm going to start with a letter. The majority, these letters are all between April and May, really. We started at the end of March when Colorado issued its stay-at-home orders. And Pam and I both hold up on either side of the Continental Divide, me on the Utah side, very close to my homeland, and Pam on the other side, the east-facing side. And knowing we'd never met, but yet we were surrounded by millions of acres of amazing public lands, and that we were able to work from home, and we had so many privileges that people around us did not. And we were acutely aware of that as we were writing. And of course, as the death toll mounted and more of what we hold dear in democracy, healthcare, women's rights, Native rights, the economy, like all the things that were starting to be dismantled, the Clean Air Act in particular, these reached a more feverish pitch. So I'm going to read to you a letter from April 5th, 2020. Hello, Pam. I'm writing from inside the wind tunnel while being sandblasted by desert pollens. I want to take a fort to my itchy, swollen eyes. I admire that you knew enough about yourself not to have a kid. I've cherished my freedom, but I didn't learn how to honor it until I'd given it all away. I was so busy proving to Ruby's father that I would be a kick-ass mother that I never stopped to think about whether or not I could be a good one if the conditions of my life and marriage were such that I could thrive, so that in turn my child could thrive. I'm plagued by this worry that I've shortchanged Ruby, that I may have even caused her health issues by failing all tests of maternal aptitude. For one thing, I leave her a lot. We do a lot of confessing in these letters. And every time I'm booked to go somewhere I'm dying to explore that I must write about, my daughter goes into crisis, which leads to another dirty little secret. I've never canceled. I go anyway. When she was diagnosed with Graves' disease at 6 years of age, I ran off to the French caves to commune with the animals painted there. I went to the Isle of Arran off of Scotland when she was diagnosed with epilepsy. And when her epilepsy worsened, I headed for Mongolia and jumped on a horse. I can't really explain it, and maybe I wouldn't go if her dad weren't such a good caregiver, but I know that my staying gets all consuming, and that's not good for either Ruby or me. There is a price to pay for my going, from other mothers especially. My closest friends, and Devin, though, my husband, know better. They're like, just go already or you'll crumble. We'll help cover for you, but you gotta go. And Ruby, bless her, much as she hates it, she knows that if I don't go, I'll wither. You said, despite your mother, you turned out all right. More than all right, I'd say. And I think Ruby, despite my maternal shortcomings, and because of what she's been through, is one hell of a human. You nailed it when you observed she's my favorite animal. She is that for sure, which is saying a lot because I love animals infinitely, love all the ways they burrow or charge into my life. What haunts me most in this discussion is that your friend compared your would-be child to Tibet, to going on a trek, say in Tibet, that it was the same kind of journey. Oh my God, the more we refuse to read from patriarchy's motherhood script, the more pushback there is. For example, last Thanksgiving, 2 guys who worked on Utah wilderness issues with me, good guys and like-minded, I thought, joined us for dinner. One asked what I was writing. I mentioned a second memoir, my obsession with these ancient women warriors from Mongolia. They asked questions, but it was more like a cross-examination aimed at proving the project worthless, as in, well, that's cute, but how could a story about mothers and the women warriors matter when we are trying to save the planet? I was sitting there after 2 days of cooking, having yet to taste a bite of food because the attack was so steady. I finally stopped and said, what the fuck are you guys doing? It's Thanksgiving, for God's sake. Of course, how fitting to have these guys declare eminent domain over this colonialist ritual in which we were all, I could suddenly see, inexplicably still participating. They, of course, sat back in their chairs and sighed. One even rolled his eyes. Their faces read, plain as day, here we go again, another sad example of Me Too getting taken too far. Now, I am used to this kind of dismissal from men, but it is maddening to see it in the guys who are supposed to be on my side, who should value social justice every bit as much as eco-justice, because the two are inextricable unless you are saving wilderness purely for selfish reasons. Which leads me to something I didn't quite come clean about earlier in our exchange, yet another confession. When I first read Cowboys Are My Weakness, Pam's earliest book, which I bet a lot of you are familiar with, I threw it across the room. Now I can be reactive and over the top about things, but I usually manage to circle back and say, now what was that about, Amy? And I welcome the animals that come through dreams to show us a part of ourselves, for better or for worse. Of course, I love it when the elk medicine or the big red stallion who breaks down my door comes through. But there is also the vulnerable little cottontail and the sensual rattlesnake, full of the venom we need to kill our apathy, our disembodiment. But there are also black widows, which when Ruby was young infested my dreams and our house too, I kid you not. That's another kind of poison, a kind of toxic dark feminine that sinks its fangs in so fast I don't see it coming. So I picked the book back up, went to therapy, talked about cowboys. And then I could see the spider in me. Only then could I disentangle from a web of toxic relationships, from believing if only I were a better hunter, hiker, lover, cowgirl, climber, drinker than even the most absent man would suddenly, magically become present. This eventually made me into another kind of species altogether, embedded me in another kind of relationship altogether. So many books that I love, the most important ones of my life, I've had that reaction to. They open a door in me. They offer the invitation to step through. I finally go, but not without a few animals as company, me kicking and screaming bloody murder. Our stories are deeply personal. And as you said, they are also political, environmental, meaning the story of women is a story of the world. So yes, let's draw our swords, knock our arrows, let's ride. There are a few men who will go with us and won't even tell us how to tack our horses. I'll diverge here to say that one thing I love about the ancient Scythian horsewomen is that even though the Greeks both mythologized and vilified, two sides of the same coin really, them as man-eating, baby-killing Amazons, their culture very much involved men, and the two genders were quite fluid in terms of warring, hunting, training horses, and raising children. In one tomb, there might be a woman warrior buried with all kinds of armament, and in the next tomb, a man laid to rest with none, cradling a child instead. In other tombs, there are men and women together, both with weapons and sometimes children, but they always, always had horses, falcons, dogs. This is the life I believe will save us, the one where we are badass and outside, moving across good ground, where we can be moms and warriors and writers and lovers all at once. There are nights when my daughter's seizures keep going, when she gets blue in the face, and I'm counting carefully how long each seizure lasts because all that time she's not getting oxygen. And every time I'm tempted to think, my God, I'm just a small woman in flannel pajamas, because it doesn't feel right to be what so many people want me to be, which is the fierce mama bear. Now, I love bears, and I've had a standoff with the sow grizzly with two cubs when we surprised one another on a trail in British Columbia, and she was the scariest, most awesome thing I've ever seen up close. But I'm not that bear. I am not an apex predator. I'm scrawnier, scrappier. I lack maternal instincts, which she clearly had a shit ton of. And I do wear flannel pajamas. I'm sick of being pegged as the fierce mama bear because I fight fiercely for my kid. I'm sick of being likened to the Black Widow, the original femme fatale, because I've had more than my fair share of failed relationships. So this is where the women warriors come in, where they matter. They do sing in our veins, even now. I know because I've heard them on those long nights when I'm doing battle with epilepsy. I can feel that ghostly warhorse under my ass, that quiver full of arrows strapped to my thigh. I feel it alive in me, women who were almost animal, who embodied many animals, but never only one or the other. Right now, I am a Steller's jay, raucous, scolding. Like this mohawk bird, I rarely leave the forest canopy, which is my desk in the loft. Rarely do I descend to ground, and then only for food. But an hour from now, I'll be another creature altogether. Oh, and that photo you sent with your students at your wedding, it touches me so deeply. The kind of nurturing you're gifting to these young writers, the way you help them birth their stories into the world. This work we do, it's both fierce and tender. It is the work of the warrior mother animal who is wide awake, battling for a better world. And whether these two guys at Thanksgiving know it or not, they will not save the planet without us. So let's sharpen the blades. Let's be beautiful and maternal and brutal all at once. For all things wild and wondrous, Amy.
This is April 9th, 2020. Little sun blast on my face. I'll just try to turn it to get at it. No. Oh well. Let's just have a white forehead.
It's your aura.
My aura. Hi, Amy. I'll show you just real quickly because it's fun because she read that part. Our wonderful artist, Claire Taylor, who made the beautiful cover, also gave us birds to represent our letters. So Amy's is a Stellar's J right there, as she just read. And I am a belted kingfisher. April 9th, 2020. Hi, Amy. I had a really shitty day Sunday. I don't know if Amy said this, but we sort of took turns falling apart. And this is a letter where I fall apart. I had a really shitty day Sunday. The cut on my hand opened up badly because it did so great for the first 24 hours. I decided I didn't have to pay attention to it anymore. And then right before bed, my friend Sarah wrote and told me the US had stopped giving out passports, ostensibly because of COVID. But when one follows the train we've been riding these last 3 years, it is hard not to think of fascism and a military dictatorship where passport renewal might just cease to be a thing. I know my passport doesn't expire until 2026, and that's enough time to know whether I can stay in this country and speak freely or if I'll have to make a run for the border. So I thought it would be good to put my hands on my passport just to reassure myself it was there. But it wasn't there. In the very back corner of my underwear drawer, clever, I know, where it usually resides. So I tore the bedroom apart, every drawer upside down on the floor. I thought, well, you've been running so hard this last year. It's probably in a backpack or a suitcase or a tote bag somewhere. So all of those were emptied and gone through fast and frantically the first time, then more slowly and depressingly as the moon went across the sky. I tore apart my car. I tore apart all of my tax return paraphernalia, the underwear drawer again, and the sock drawer and the t-shirt drawer in case I had decided to outsmart some imagined robber. And then my desk. And then the other desk, which is basically nobody's, and then my camera case. You get the idea. It was about 3 a.m. when I started to cry, because I have known since spring of 2016 that this soulless ghoul of a man who doesn't admire anyone except dictators and himself, who millions of Americans chose to run this country, I have known he was going to get me. He is not even Trump to me, but my dead father come back to get me after all. I only thought I got away. I had these glorious 40 years between leaving my father's house and coming back to his house, only this time, weirdly, there are 330 million people and we are all in this house together. He has been waiting for me, I sobbed into my big dog's back, to make the one fatal mistake that would allow him to get me. There I was, arranging all the cans of Hatch chilies in the cabinet according to their expiry date, figuring out how to get fish delivered along with a case of Meyer lemons for their vitamin C. There I was with my 30-year-old river trip first aid kit butterfly closures and enough of the only dog food that doesn't give Henry the shits to last until August, my OSHA tincture and my bottle of thieves, my deep breathing exercises to stave off pneumonia, all that. And I lost my goddamn passport weeks, months before the US stopped giving them out forever, turning me into a sitting duck. I did not wake Mike, that's my husband, in the middle of the night to tell him this, though he would not have been angry if I had. I cried with the dog, and then I played wordscapes on my phone until the sky got light. Mike asked if the passport could be at the Davis apartment. And though it seemed impossible, I could have been so careless as to leave it there in October when I got back from teaching a week in Mexico, I couldn't say for sure. Mike said Trump was so interested in getting the country reopened, even if the ultimate plan is to become like Russia, there would be at least a window where I could get a new passport. He reminded me that the US-Canadian border is the most porous in the world. So many trees, he said, without laughing, without saying I was crazy, without for 1 second or even in the smallest way implying I might be way too damaged to love. When it got late enough in California to call a friend, I did, and he went over to my apartment, and sure enough, there was my passport in that underwear drawer, all the way in the back corner. To be clear, I cried all night because other than the moment the knife entered my hand, I had not cried since the pandemic began. I had not cried about John Prine, about Terrence McNally, about the 12,000 dead and counting, about how much of this could have been avoided without those goddamn 70 days of lies and withholding and congressmen selling stocks, about how much harder it is going to be to make a living now. It had been weeks since I had cried about all the things I was crying about periodically before, like the babies in cages at the border, like the end of the Clean Air Act, the fucking Clean Air Act, about all of the things we have already talked about, so I don't need to name them again. But maybe the more important thing to say is that I was crying very specifically and relentlessly because I didn't know where my passport was, because I had misplaced the document that allowed me to go, to run, to spend a month in Patagonia or a decade in Iceland, to buy a garlic farm in Caslo, British Columbia, or a crumbling farmhouse on a Greek island, to fly to France, where I am supposed to be teaching a class in June, doubtful it will happen, to go anywhere other than this fracturing country, which has become all too much like my father's house. Which brings me back to motherhood and an unplanned pregnancy 30 years ago in a good but not necessarily long-term relationship. But to make my decision about the viability of the relationship is to tell a lie. His name was Mike too, and he was a good man and went on to have a bunch of kids and horses and a good life with a woman much different from me. I terminated that pregnancy because the idea that I might not be able to run, to go to Mongolia or Pittsburgh or the grocery store knocked the wind out of me. It bent me in half. How much of it is the matrilineal curse of death by childbirth? My mother always said, I gave up everything I loved for you. And her mother died in childbirth with her, which is what that line refers to. How much of it is knowing that if I didn't keep running from my father's house, it would be the end of me? And how much is for the pure joy that going affords me? This is a pie chart I don't know how to fill in. I'm glad you get to go. Glad the people closest to you understand. As for the mothers who look down their nose at you, fuck them. You are modeling for Ruby a woman who knows what she needs and who sometimes puts her needs before the needs society thinks she should prioritize. And let's face it, even with your going, you are there for Ruby more and more fully than anyone else. And you get to be there as the fully embodied woman, writer, traveler, adventurer, mother you are, not some shell of yourself who is doing what everyone else thinks you should. It takes a village, and it should take one. I turned out okay because I learned early there were many people in the world who had things to show me, to give me, to teach me. I learned in that process to say yes to the world. And speaking of people we are telling to fuck off, if anyone said or even implied to my face that the Me Too thing has gone too far, I would go full Tasmanian devil on them, whether I had just cooked them a Thanksgiving meal or not. Have you seen that CNN video of all the people going to church? If you have not, Google CNN washed in the blood of Christ. Watch the first women interviewed and tell me if it isn't horror film scary, except more so. I mean, what is the difference between that clip and a horror film? Except we live in it now. It's real. There is nothing shameful about choosing your life, whether it is choosing not to give mouth-to-mouth recession to an already dead kid or going to Mongolia because that's what you need. We have big battles before us now, and we have no time for so many of the things that held us back. One of those things for me is my incessant need to increase the degree of difficulty of any task exponentially to prove my worthiness. Things are tough enough, thank you, without your disparaging mothers or wilderness bros or the ghost of my father or anyone else who will feel better about their selfish choices because of my silence. Beautiful and brutal, introspective and ferocious. I am pretty sure the only way through is up high on the cantle, mane and tail flying. Trying to stay safe, trying to be invisible can only lead to despair. The only time I feel really okay anymore is when I'm fighting for the things I love, whether it's a student manuscript or protection for wolves and grizzly bears. Battling for a better world is the only occupation now, and it is women's turn to lead the charge, maybe with a few good men in tow. I hope all is well on your side of the San Juans and the wind has calmed a bit. It has here. Today was stupidly gorgeous, and we found a new hiking trail. Be well, my friend. Pam. So that's our reading, and we are happy to take questions from the audience if anyone has some.
I think Amanda was going to field them for us.
Yeah, so now's a good time, folks, to drop your questions into the chat box. And as those are coming in, I will read. Caroline Ellis says, wow, these letters are incredible. Really encapsulates what's going on right now. So thank you, Caroline. Thank you, Amy and Pam. I have a quick question. I'm a big fan of snail mail myself, and I'm curious what role for each of you letter writing will continue to take in your life, and maybe even between your interpersonal correspondences.
We took time off because the letter writing became pretty all-consuming for those months that we were writing. We took time off to catch up on our other parts of our life, and then to go on this dystopian book tour. But we are going home and we're going to start writing again because it was so important. It was such a vital way to staying sane and making sense of things in a world that no longer made sense. And so we feel like we'd like to chronicle what happens next in terms of the election and everything that we're facing right now, the fires, all of it. So we're going to write again. And I think it really proved, it just underscored how important it is that we find ways to communicate with one another when we're this isolated, because it changed everything to have that kind of communication rather than just sort of short emails or texting or liking somebody's pretty picture of their latte on Facebook, which fortunately we're not seeing much of anymore. Like, people are really posting substantive stuff. And that's exciting, but it's still not the same as actually generating some sort of intimate solidarity with somebody else. So we'll keep writing.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, just to add to that a little bit, we've now been traveling together for about a month during COVID, which is
Crazy.
and fires, which is no easy thing, and we hadn't met until July 1st. So all I'm saying when I say that is that we built a real friendship out of nothing except letters. We had never laid eyes on each other. We had read each other's books. So that's something. But, I think we both took 3 or 4 or 5 hours out of our day to write these letters. They were crafted things. We were presenting ourselves to each other. We were talking about what was happening. We were challenging each other to be vulnerable and to go deep into our own histories and our own thoughts. Like, you can't do that in a text or a Facebook post, no matter what. And so I do think this has made, I have a friend, Fenton Johnson, the writer Fenton Johnson, who's a wonderful guy, wonderful writer. And he insists, he has continued to write letters, like, through everything, not COVID or not, but before that, when everybody went to email, he writes physical letters. And, he always said there's great value in it. And I believed him because I loved getting his letters, but I never felt it for myself, like how different it is to really sit down and craft a letter of many pages. And, when you go back, of course, and read historic letters, to read, just for instance, Georgia O'Keeffe's letters. I love her letters more than her painting. Her letters are so funny and beautiful. But in any case, I think it's a lost art. And I think we're only beginning to realize the extent of the damage that's being done to us as human beings, because we can't be together and we can't hug and we can't go for coffee and we can't catch up. And I think letters are a way to be intimate in a time when we can't be especially with our girlfriends, the one thing I miss more than anything is my girlfriends, and and I think letters can be a wonderful way to bridge that gap.
Yeah, and thank you so much for inviting us and the world into the intimacy of your letters. We so appreciate it. We have a question in the chat, and it says, hi, Pam and Amy. Thank you so much for sharing such deep and personal stories with us today. I also have the urge to go, and I am frightened by this coming year. Thank you for helping express the fear and frustration and host of emotions we are feeling right now. What would you tell women and young women right now before this election?
we are so sure that it's women who are going to remake the world, and that we have been conditioned for so long to think that we don't have the power we actually have. And nobody's tried harder to do this than the current president. And as we came together in these letters and created this vision of the book, and as we came together with Tory House Press, all women, who said yes to every possible aspect of a book that should never have been able to come out this year, against all the odds, to just see women circumvent these old scripts and circumvent the way things are done, publishing conventions in particular, and to like create this book that created its own weather and its own momentum. And then to see all the women that are coming out, and they, we'll get 20 people at a live reading, an outdoor reading, everybody's masked, but they can't, they can't accommodate more people than that. But every woman buys like 10 books and says, I'm sending this to all my nieces, all my nephews and nieces, well, nieces in particular, to my sisters, to my book club. And you just start to see this, it's like somebody's like blowing on these coals that have been in there, and they're starting to get really hot, and they're about to burst into these exquisite, powerful flames. And I mean, we've seen that already in women, female leadership across the planet, whether it's reducing COVID or it's decreasing, all the greenhouse gases, whatever the thing is, feeding people. We are faced with we're in the middle of an attempted coup, and we have been divided so much, and we've been isolated so much. And I think all of us are just not standing for it. And we're finding ways to work around all that and keep this power and these voices going. And I think at this point, we're unstoppable.
Tell the story about your friend.
Yes. Okay. So when word got out that we were, that these letters were going to become a book, I got a letter from an older white male environmental writer, somebody I love and admire very much. And the letter essentially said, it's quaint that you guys want to write these letters, but nobody really reads something like that. And besides, you guys probably like each other too much for there to be any like real dramatic tension or exciting narrative in the stories. And I was like, oh, this is like the scene at the Thanksgiving table where we're supposed to be on your side, but we actually aren't giving you a platform or an alternative script. We want you to stay in this box and do it this way. And I wrote back, and I was just like, first of all, that's pretty insulting, but it hardly matters to me what you think, because we have a vision and we're running with it. And I think that's what women can keep doing, because the thing about us liking one another too much, I mean, dramatic tension, we have enough dramatic tension in the world. We don't need any more of that. Like, what matters now is solidarity and sisterhood. And when I say sisterhood, I mean also standing with men like Amanda, your wonderful husband, Zach, who, somebody you can really stand with that gets what sisterhood is about, and what we can circumvent if we step outside of these contexts that have been, that certain people still insist that we operate within.
Yeah.
We just keep stepping outside of the box and speaking and writing and acting. Otherwise, we will not recognize the coup. If the coup happens, it will fail. And it will be because every person that's on here right now just says, I won't recognize it.
Yeah, the days of like putting on our thongs and getting down in the mud and pulling each other's hair are officially over.
They're done.
And we're working together. And, and of course, just to reiterate something else Amy said earlier, as white women, like, we recognize how privileged we are. We recognize that there are people who are suffering so much more than we are. Yeah. And our fear, when I read that scene about the passport, I was like, oh, poor girl, can't find her passport that has allowed her to take all these amazing trips. Like, we're so aware of our own privilege, but we also don't believe that anybody's privilege will protect them, except perhaps, the 1% of the 1%ers, and we want to be allies, we recognize that we're going to be imperfect allies to Black Lives Matter and to the indigenous movements and all of that, but we want to be allies, and when we do it wrong, we're going to get called on it, and that's right. We're here for that. To me, it just seems, I've always thought that if women could just step into their own power, they're no match for us. I say in the book a little later, that women have more power in their little fingers than Mitch McConnell has in his entire ball sack, if he even has a ball sack, like hard to imagine it, but let's not. But we have all this power. I can feel it, we just have to believe and step into it and activate it.
And I think that the one other thing I'd like to say about that is that there's been this way we've been trained, conditioned not to express our rage. We're nasty women, or we're monsters or witches or bitches or whatever. And, for me, rage, and this was certainly the intent behind Desert Cabal, which also got a lot of heat for being another angry kind of ball buster book, but that rage is all love. It's not, it's not the kind of hate that we're seeing elsewhere. Like, this is a rage that burns so clean and true and creates light down dark corridors for all of us. And so I think also embracing that sense of rage and not apologizing for it anymore, or thinking somehow that it's a bad or ugly thing, because it's not. I mean, we can be brutal and beautiful all at once.
Yeah, and I appreciate you talking about allyhood in this and in the book. I think you really create a very inviting space for people to join in an allyship and what that looks like for men and for others. So I want to ask a question relating again to sisterhood. I'm going to combine two of the questions that we've had in the chat from Kay Costello and Caroline Ellis. The first part of the question is, how did the letter writing start, and what a gift it was to find each other? And the second part of that is, did you find it difficult at the beginning to open up and reveal such deep thoughts and confessions to one another?
Well, the letter writing started, and we can tell that story with a little more detail. Orion Magazine wrote, Sumanth Prabhakar, the editor of Orion Magazine, wrote to Amy and said he wanted her to be the first writer, part of the first pair of writers in this series that they were doing for the pandemic called Together Apart. And pairs of writers were going to write letters to each other to see how they were coping with the pandemic and what was on their minds and what they were thinking about in terms of the natural world and also the social world. And he asked Amy who she would like to correspond with. And just as serendipity would have it, even though we had never met, that morning on Facebook, Amy had posted something about how grateful she was to be holed up with her husband and daughter, that if you had to be locked down, it was good to be with them. And she had worded it in this beautiful way, which I did not. And so there we go. That's a little better. Yeah. So
We're chasing shade.
Yeah, we're trying to get the glare off our faces. So I had reposted it, even though I didn't really know Amy. I had blurbed Desert Cabal. I had loved Desert Cabal, but I didn't really know Amy. And I just, without thinking, reposted it. And I said, this is the truest thing I've seen since the pandemic has begun. And then I thought, oh, that was really personal. And I just reposted it. And so I sent Amy a Facebook message that said, hey, I just reposted your post. And it occurred to me that it might've been a little personal and I shouldn't have done that. Is it okay that I reposted it? And she wrote back to me and said, oh, Pam, it's all personal now. And I thought, okay, I really want to know this woman. And I had read Cabal and loved Cabal and blurbed Cabal, but that was the moment I thought, I want to be her friend. and as serendipity would have it, because we had that little exchange, she said to Sumanth at Orion, I want to write to Pam. And then Orion said, great. And we were off and running. So that's how it began. And And then once we got our 3,000 words turned into Orion, by that time, we just knew we wanted to keep writing. Again, not with a book in mind, just because it was holding us up and we were building something, you know, whether it was a friendship or a book or a call to arms or whatever it was. We knew we were in it and we were going to continue. I would say for me, it was not hard to be vulnerable. When I read Desert Cabal, I recognized such a kindred spirit. You know, it's that wonderful feeling when you read something and you think, these are exactly the words in my head that I've never turned into words. And so much of Cabal was about that, even though I'm not a 6th generation Mormon and we have different backstories, but I really felt that. And so, and I do think the early letters were full of affirmation for each other and what each other was going through. So there really wasn't a moment ever where I thought, oh, I just took a risk and maybe that was a mistake. I didn't have that moment. They just kept building and getting more intimate and getting more, there's this line through the book that we keep saying, well, here's another dirty secret. And we do a lot of confessing. And so I don't know, Amy might want to answer that, but for me, there was not that moment of hesitation.
Well, and I think we both are deeply autobiographical writers anyway. And there was so much happening. There was, of course, all the things for us to talk about personally, but every day in the news cycle, there was some horror to also talk about things that we really cared about, like the Native communities in the Four Corners that are near and dear to our homes and communities that we participate in, knowing what their death tolls were, and, the Black Lives Matter, George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor, like all these things that were happening that were not personal, but that we cared about deeply. Like we just kind of moved back and forth between those two kinds of concerns. It was pretty fluid.
We have some more questions coming in, and Dan Myers of the Bluff Arts Fest asked a question, and I think it's, time has been a weird concept throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. It's been very amorphous. It goes so slow, it goes so fast. And so I'd love for you to speak to that. Dan asks, how does it feel looking back a few months after the letters? Does it feel like a moment in the past now?
Great question. Given what you said, the way time has somehow, it's not what it was. I think Torrey House Press and us had moments of worrying that the letters would feel passé, that they would feel, and in a weird way, they feel like they were written so long ago and so much has happened since then. But at the same time, the concerns are just growing for us. All these issues that we're worried about are becoming, the delusions we had about the world, especially white privileged people, those are falling away as the realities of less privileged people are getting closer and closer to our front door. It feels to us like the urgency has just grown bigger with time. So the way time either has shrunk or stretched out, it feels like these concerns have too, all at once.
Yeah, I mean, to answer one super literal part of that question, I don't believe that the pandemic is in the past in any way. I believe we're moving into a dark winter of COVID. I think it will be astonishing, that we even had this conversation now. This is going to seem as naive as when I read there are 12,000 dead and counting. And that seemed like an impossible number when I wrote those words, in April. And now we're at 227 or 228 or whatever we are today, 228,000 dead, which is a number that we must not become a nerd to, as it hits 500,000, as it hits 1 million. We cannot lose our humanity enough for that to only be a number. And that's something I'm conscious of every day. And I I was very worried that even though we were getting the book out too fast, so much would have happened in between. And it did. More happened than we ever would have imagined in June and July and August and those months between turning it in and it coming out. But the fact is, it didn't matter, you know, that it, just like what Amy said, I mean, these concerns these fears and these anxieties we were talking through, you know, the conditions have only become worse. So it is a book that's a moment in time, and we were finished writing it before George Floyd was murdered. And, you know, but then like it hadn't gone to press yet. And we talked a lot about how to handle that. We added a few sentences about it in the preface, but you know, we had to stop the clock somewhere. But I think in retrospect, it hasn't really mattered because we're still fully in it. And the things we were talking about do apply more than even I thought they might have. But it is a great question because it was something we worried about a ton.
Yeah. Oh, and thank you, Dan, for asking that. Another question from Kirsten Allen. What has challenged or surprised you most about sharing airmail with people at the events you've done over the past few weeks?
Interestingly enough, every community we go into has its own COVID culture. And so you arrive just before a book event and you're very quickly trying to assess where that culture is comfortable for you and where it feels dangerous, and how you sort of negotiate with the event organizers and the folks who show up, the attendees themselves. That's been kind of weird. What else?
You know, I think, and Amy mentioned this before, I think the beautiful thing that has happened is how often people want 5 books or 7 books or 10 books. And that sounds very self-serving, but we don't mean it that way. You know, the fact that women come and some men, but mostly women come and, you know, at first they're not engaged and, you know, of course everyone's got masks on, which has also been, you know, weird. Different, but we can watch their eyes as they get more and more fired up, and, you know, they get brighter and they lean forward, and then they come up and say, I'm sending this to all of my nieces or all of my sisters. And I think that was the dream for this book. You know, again, this is not about selling copies in any way. It was like, how many hands can we put this book in before the election? And then, you know, how many hands can we put this book in for the fight that's going to ensue after the election about restoring some of this, you know, justice and environmental justice and all the things that we've lost. So I think the fact that, I mean, we've both had people write to us and say, if I meet you at the crossroads of 160, you know, in Montrose, can you bring me 15 signed copies? It's like a drug deal. Like we drive around like drug dealers, and we, you know, flip the back of the car and here's your 12 for your book club, you know? And so that aspect of it has been, you know, beautiful. I won't even say like surprising or unexpected, but I have never like met people at Crossroads and delivered 15 books before. That's a new experience. And the fact that that's happened consistently, you know, like, you know, we'll be traveling together and Amy will say, oh, we got another order, you know, and that's been really, really gratifying that people want to share this book with the people who are close to them in their lives, men and women.
I mean, I think the book has been like medicine for a lot of us, and it sounds like that's that beautiful experience that you're talking about. Well, I thank you so much for, you know, lighting a fire under us to think about, you know, what should we do with our extreme emotions these days? Who should we reach out to? What would our animal or bird be if we wrote our own book? You know, we just have so appreciated you both joining us today. Is there anything you'd like to say in closing?
About that website?
Oh, yeah. A couple of things. If people are feeling really isolated and nervous and not sure how to make sense of things, which we've heard from a lot of people out there, we have directed them towards Heather Cox Richardson's Letters from an American that she's a historian, a brilliant one. If you sign up for her letter, she delivers it every night to your inbox, and she also posts them on Facebook. Heather.
Yeah, Heather Cox Richardson. And if you're overwhelmed by the news or your Twitter feed, which I know that I can Twitter my way right out of sleep at night. So if you do feel overwhelmed and you just think I need a break, Heather Cox Richardson's letters, they're contextualized, like everything that's happening right now, she contextualizes historically. She's very calm. She's not an alarmist. She gives it to you in a way that makes it available to take in even when you're overwhelmed. She's I can't even imagine this last 3 years without her.
And then the other thing, there's a website called choosedemocracy.us, and they break down the ways what is happening qualify as an attempted coup. And they break it down into such simple steps to know how to respond to that if the takeover actually, if there's a way that the election is not allowed to go forward or it's challenged in some disingenuous way. They provide case studies of democracies where coups have been attempted and succeeded for just a few days and then fail because of average citizens just refusing to recognize it and what that looks like. And it's just a very simple, like, okay, I go and I look at those, the way they've broken it down into 10 steps or 10 things to look at. And I feel like I can handle this tumultuous time and respond in a way that's effective and that I know other people can respond in. So those are sort of the two things, that and write letters to one another. Don't let the overwhelm of the news cycle and the being locked away behind closed doors and then beneath masks stop you from feeling the kind of solidarity that we're out here trying to promote, because it really does change everything.
Yeah. And the only other thing I would say is, in your own communities, like, see about driving people to vote, see about being a poll watcher if that's needed in your community. There's lots of things we can still do. I know a lot of you have been writing letters and postcards and all that, but there's still a lot of things to be done in the next 16 days. And also, I would just say, if you would like a copy of Airmail, we have left signed copies at Ken Sanders Rare and Used Books. We have left signed copies at the Boulder Bookstore. We are going to hopefully get to sign a bunch of copies at Back of Beyond
In
in Moab today. There's also books in Telluride at Between the Covers. And also, I think maybe Kirsten might say something about getting them from Torrey House Press.
Yeah. Yes. And whatever you do, please don't order them from Amazon. And I know that the proceeds, if you do purchase them directly from Torrey House Press, there are proceeds that are being donated today to the Bluff. Do I have that right, Kirsten?
Yeah, that's an even better idea.
Yeah, Kirsten, why don't you jump in there?
Yes, 20% of all copies of Airmail and any Torrey House Press book that is purchased through the Torrey House Press store today will be donated back to the Bluff Arts Festival. So do a little Christmas shopping online. We just you'll get a book mailed to you with a handwritten note. It's, we don't do it as fast as Amazon. We just do it better. So shop on Torrey House Press. 20% of all book sales through the store go back to the Bluff Arts Festival today.
Oh, well, then that's definitely the way to do it. And do you have some signed copies, Kirsten, if that's what people want?
Well, we do if you sign them. I happen to have a few right with me. So yes, we will make sure that today only, we'll guarantee that copies of Airmail that go out will be signed.
Yes.
Fresh ink.
Fresh.
And just so you know, these little gems fit inside a Christmas stocking beautifully, or a solstice stocking, or whatever.
Or almost your back pocket if you've stretched it out with your giant cell phone.
Kirsten, does Torrey House Press ship internationally? We have a question that came in on the chat.
Oh gosh, we do not ship internationally right now, but the ebook is available through all ebook platforms, but we are not shipping internationally at this moment.
Maybe
If-
some smaller bookstores are able to offer that too.
Yeah. And if it's just one or two copy, if a few copies, not a whole order for an international order, Pam and I could definitely make that happen.
Yeah.
Because we have signed copies that, like we said, we're driving around the country, around the West with them in our car. So we could do that.
We could do that.
We'll make it happen.
And on behalf of the Arts Fest, I really do appreciate the donations today to the Bluff Arts Festival. We did decide to make all of our events free this year, and so we appreciate any ways that can help us bring this festival to folks again next year.
Yeah.
I guess with that, I'm gonna wrap up. Thank you so much, Amy Irvine, Pam Houston, Kirsten Allen, for joining us today safely from Salt Lake City. We've so appreciated and learned so much from you today. Everybody stay safe and be well. I want to just say a couple closing words about the Bluff Arts Fest today. This has just been absolutely the highlight of our fall here in Bluff, besides our beautiful cottonwood colors, but it's just been so great to connect with folks. I want to encourage you to keep reaching out to people and checking in with one another and looking out for one another's health and safety so that we can hopefully meet again in person next year or whenever that is best. And thanks again to our volunteers and sponsors, and be sure to follow on our website, www.bluffartsfestival.org, to see any live recordings, to visit the artist market, etc. So thanks again, everybody, and yeah, happy fall.
Bye. Thank you. Be well.